nice to have you here, Ed. Thanks for coming and tell us what you do and who you are.
Well, thank you for having me. Who I am. I guess most people will identify me as a coach and a business owner. In a previous life, I was an athlete. My sport was rugby, and that was kind of my first introduction to fitness and health, I guess. And then really like university finished for me, and I decided to open up my own gym. So that was at the age of 20, and I started Coastal Fitness. And 14 years later, we have a facility in North Point, a beautiful space. We actually had a gym now for about 10 years. And in the last 2.5 years, we also started an online coaching business called the Process Programming. And in the Process Programming, we are serving 3 groups of people. We're serving individual athletes or individuals who are looking for kind of individualized programming. We're serving affiliates. So we now have gym owners around the world who are, who have a similar vision to us, similar values to us, and we're helping their businesses grow. And the last one is coaches. We're working on coaching education and trying to uplift the standards of group coaching and individual coaching around the world. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess that's who I am in a very, very watered down.
And you also run a podcast of your own, and you're obviously committed to educating people as well. And while talking to other people, I've realized that you're a fitness coach that other people in the fitness look up to.
That's very nice to hear.
So what made you jump from being an athlete to running your own business?
The dream was always to be a professional athlete. As a child, when you're telling yourself that this is what you want to be, you kind of manifest it in a way. And whilst it sounds like I had this smooth road and I ended up, playing for the Hong Kong national team at 17 years old was when I first joined the senior team. It was never really, really something that I wanted. I think it was maybe something more I said I wanted. And, I've done a lot of digging into why I said that, social pressures, parents,
How
friends.
old were you when you were realizing all those things?
I was realizing probably like secondary school was a big changing moment for me, I think. Like moving away from primary, you're in this new environment. You can be impressionable, you can kind of start fresh, you can create this new identity for yourself. And I got very lost in that identity, like I think a lot of teenagers do. There was something that always held me back. Maybe it was actually, it's not cool if I'm training too often. I need to be hanging with the hipsters. I need to be going out drinking on a Wednesday and Saturday. And I definitely tie a lot of regret to kind of those times. But I think the main catalyst that moved me from, eventually stopping being an athlete and moving into coaching, it wasn't a definitive moment. But really, I was a very broken athlete. So what I mean by that was that as an athlete, I was getting injured so much. I was spending more time in the gym working with the strength and conditioning coaches than I actually was spending on the field. And every time I would break and have an operation and a surgery, I would have to educate myself more on why it was happening, how I can get myself back to 100%. And I kind of became very obsessed with like the process of training. I was more fascinated and interested in the training side of things than I was in actually playing. And now that was interesting. It was kind of like, even when I look back, it was like in those early stages, there was parts of me that was starting to resonate more as a coach than the athlete already. At the same time, as soon as I finished university, and I was, contracted to the national rugby team to be a national player, the Hong Kong government was paying me funds every month to represent the Sevens team. I'd also started up my coaching business. That became the thing I was thinking about every day. Rugby became something that was like an afterthought. But I was still having to wake up, train with the national team, have club training, train the weekends. It was 2 to 3 times every day was rugby, but every hour spent between those sessions was spent obsessing about my business, coaching clients, building my business.
So you had that smooth transition between two?
Well, so really what was happening is I'm juggling 2 things right now. I'm wearing 2 hats. I'm the rugby player, the athlete, but I'm also the business owner and the coach. Training and competing became more of a drag. I almost kind of woke up one day and was like, the season had just ended with the national team. And I think we just competed in the Asian Games, won a silver medal. First time a team sport in Hong Kong had done that. I wasn't full of elation, and I wasn't like, yes, I'm ready for the next year. I was like, this is my time to go.
So you basically retired during your prime time?
What I think a lot of people would be saying, at the age of 24, 25, that's when your career's just taken off. You've got all these amazing opportunities in Hong Kong. You're recognized as an elite sport now. You know, like this is where it starts. And that was for me where I was like, actually, this isn't what I want. It sounds like I just kind of stopped playing sport and became a coach. No, what I actually did was I took the time and energy that I put into rugby into a new sport. And that was CrossFit. I want to make it to the top in CrossFit. This is going to be my new sport now. This is going to be my new rugby. And it wasn't until 2 years after pursuing the sport of CrossFit and trying to run a business and trying to build a team and all that crazy stuff that I was like, okay, I'm back here again. I can't do this anymore. At that point was when I really separated my identity from being an athlete. It was like no longer about performance necessarily or being like the fittest or the strongest that I can be.
Your value shifting.
Yeah, I want my movement and my health, physical and mental wellness to be supporting the other things in my life, like helping other people, like growing a business, like building a team.
I want to go back a little bit and talk about when you first opened your business, because being passionate about something and doing a business around it are two different things. It takes a lot of effort to build your own business and have your team that you could rely on and educate them. So what was it like when you first started? What was the market like in Hong Kong? What was the fitness industry like here back then?
Well, when I started the business 14 years ago, number one, there wasn't as many people coaching. I started at a time where the outdoor training movement was getting quite big. Any of the public parks, it would just be full of people training outdoors. And that was our first iteration of group training. And, you know, at this point in time, like I'd become very interested in the methodology of CrossFit. Didn't agree with everything in CrossFit, but I love the concept of mixed modal fitness. And the group setting was always attracted me because I've been a team sport player my entire life. And I love like the idea of like camaraderie, you know, like moving with other people and like building connections with other people. If I can create my rugby environment that I loved, or my team environment that I had growing up in the actual exercise space, like that's pretty special. I remember kind of, you know, the first 3 to 4 years of, you know, working in freelance gyms and signing up and paying the hour and bringing my client there, and just always being frustrated where I was like, this isn't the facility that I really want to be coaching people in. The equipment's limited. It's not the environment. Like you're working around other people doing different things. There's no vibe. I was young at this time, you know, I'm 21, 22, you know, I'm much younger than most of the other coaches in the industry. You get a lot of imposter syndrome as a young kid coming into what would normally be regarded as a mature industry, because, you know, you're dealing with people 2-3 times your age sometimes. And everyone was like, nah, you can't, that doesn't work in Hong Kong. Like no one opens their own gym. And I was just like, nah, it's just not, it doesn't seem right. I think I can do it. And then, you know, I got this kind of opportunity one year. You know, one of my old rugby teammates, he was a bit of an entrepreneur. He wanted to open up a kickboxing studio. And he said, why don't we go 50-50 on a space? It was like a big step into the unknown. Like there was one CrossFit gym in Hong Kong at that time. There's no market for this. I'm gonna have to create this market essentially. There was just this rise away, moving away from commercial gyms, wanting to explore movement more and do these different things. And we just happened to open at the right time. Yeah. So like, you know, we rode that wave and helped push that wave, I would say. We created a lot of that wave by being, you know, the second ever CrossFit gym, but we're also doing things quite differently. But I wanted to take the craziness of CrossFit as a methodology and as a sport, combine it with solid scientific principles of training, and combine those two and try to make it into something a bit different. I think we created like a bit of a hybrid model of mixed modal fitness in a smarter, more intelligent, safer way. And, you know, in the next 2 years, like I think 8 CrossFit gyms opened. And a lot of our members left to make their own gyms. And I thought that was really cool. Like now together we're making this noise about this different way of training. We have a very diverse population of people training now. There's so many different offerings. People are trying different things. Yeah. There's beauty in that, and there's also a curse in that as well, because sometimes when you have too many options, we get lost a little bit. And you know what my mission is, bringing back like to water down movement, to say like it's simple. We don't need to make it complex. And I want you to have fun whilst you're doing it, and like challenge your body.
I want to hear a little bit more about being in the people industry, what it takes to be in one, and what are the top 3 values that you live by to be in this space.
We are a people organization. And when I say a people organization, like I think about my team first and my employees. And, you know, our business, Coastal Fitness and the Process Programming, we always want to be about human connection. You know, when you talk about like the future of the fitness industry, like, and you think about like the metaverse and like where technology is going, it's pretty cool. Like you're gonna have people be able to do amazing workouts in their living room with a virtual reality headset. You know, they're gonna be wearing these suits where a coach can like touch them and they cue them like which muscles they should be feeling. And you know, because that's gonna make fitness a lot more accessible, and which means that the participation in exercise and fitness is going to probably rise and continue to grow. Whilst I love where technology is going, and I'm going to have to stay on top of trends and be a part of and make sure I'm aware of what's happening, I never want to lose the human connection aspect. I will always be about building relationships and having connection with people. Now that means that our market is not going to be the biggest, but that's okay. As a business owner, like, I want to build relationships and continue to have strong relationships with my team. Like I have some of my greatest friendships, and my closest people are actually my employees and my team members. If we're going to achieve the potential of what we can potentially achieve as a business, which is really about impacting as many lives as possible, I need to have an amazing team of people who share the same values, who share the same vision, and who want to do it. You know, I have 6 values which I believe in very strongly, and like these 6 values that I believe in, and I've did a lot of soul searching over the years to find these 6.
Okay, we'll keep it 6 then.
But we'll keep it 6. Okay, thank you. So those values are be honest and be humble. It's taking ownership, you know, which refers to the idea that like we are in control of our lives. Always ask yourself the question, like, what can you control? What's within your control? What's without your control? Courage over comfort is something that's super important to me. Courage over comfort really refers to the concept of, you know, choose challenging things in life, because we know that the biggest growth and the biggest learnings come from our failures. But if you're not putting yourself out there to potentially fail, we're never going to learn and we're never going to grow. Have a growth mindset. You know, growth mindset refers to the concept of like fixed mindset versus growth mindset. The fixed mindset says, this is who I am, this is who I've always been, and this is who I always will be. The growth mindset says like, you know what, you can always change. Like change is possible and change is within your power. And then, you know, the last one really is like, just be a good human being, like be kind, be courteous, say thanks, be polite, share love. We exuberate that in our language and the way that we act with our people. So at first, the values were created to help me hire the right people and to build a really good team of like-minded people, which is why it's no surprise some of my best friendships are my team members.
This is exactly why I wanted to talk to you today, because I don't want to generalize it, but at least for me, growing up in Korea and going to schools in Korea, I learned how to compete, have good scores, to do the math, to do science, although I wasn't very good at it. But you're not taught how to communicate with people and be a team player or be a leader. And especially because playing sports was not a thing back then. So a lot of my friends, and including myself, we run into these situations where we realize, okay, how do we manage this relationship with other people? I think your point about, you know, how the values you have to be in the people industry, it not only applies to people in your market, but just everyone who are in the corporate world or who are looking to set up their own business and more.
When I didn't have values, you get stuck in that vicious cycle of people pleasing, which is when you don't know authentically who you are. You end up trying to please everyone. When you get to that place where you really start to feel comfortable in your own skin, like life becomes a lot more effortless, because it's like you're not trying to please everyone anymore. Like, you know who you are, you know your beliefs, you know what you're about. This didn't ever come naturally to me. You know, I had, you know, that's why I'm always so grateful for business and like starting my own business and putting myself in a position of leadership, because that was a catalyst that forced me to have to change. You know, I had to go on my own journey to rediscover who I was. I had to learn about communication. I read all the books on communication. Through that whole journey of like reading and learning and educating myself, I think it's all contributed to me being able to be much more adaptable now. And that's not to say that, you know, I can be friends with everyone. I want to be friends with everyone. It's like, no, what I'm looking for is the people I want along for the ride on what we're doing with our businesses. Is that I want people who do have the same values, who do have the same beliefs. That's where you start to build really amazing connections and you know, and really great friendships and hopefully in a really strong business and team.
What I respect the most about that aspect is you carry that on to build a relationship between you and your members and coaches in the process business. You're not just throwing the programs out there and, okay, you do the rest of the work. You actually spend time and efforts into making sure that they're following the program well and understanding what their concerns are. That's a lot of commitment. And it's not easy to do that when you're managing all these different things in your business, right? So why do you insist on doing that?
All the enjoyment and fulfillment that I get from my job is not how much money we make at the end of the day. It's not really like how many clients we have. It's like, it's the process of making an impact and helping people. It's why we called the process program. It's why we chose that name. The fulfillment that we get comes from the process, regardless of the outcome. I want to be having a conversation on what's your health span relative to your lifespan. When I think about health span, it's like, cool, if you live to 90, but at the age of 70, you're in a wheelchair, like, you see how there's a bit of disconnect there? Like, I want people to be like out running, playing sports, like challenging their bodies, learning new movement, thriving, like having high sex drives, doing all the cool shit that we've done our whole lives until the day they die. That's really what I believe in.
Well, you are probably one of the very few people that I met and who's comfortable talking about themselves very openly. But I gave you a very difficult task of coming here with one naked truth that people might not know yet.
I forgot about this question. And when you asked me, I was like, oh, that was a really hard question.
I know. I realize that this is the most difficult question for any interviewee that I have here. I mean, you've exposed yourself fully, but is there something else that you maybe haven't shared before?
The biggest area in my life that I'm realizing right now that I'm still haven't quite come to terms with, that I'm not happy with, and there's more work I need to do, is like the idea of like vulnerability in intimate relationships. So I'm like the very vulnerable person when I talk about everything else, coaching, health, business, life. But it's
very interesting.
Yeah, and it's like relationships that I saw as a child, early relationships as a teenager, being in the group that I was in school, has all led to like, there's doubt. I'm not as vulnerable as I really want to be in the intimate setting of like, a loving partner, not necessarily the course of like the actual act of intimacy. So I guess that's like something I haven't really spoken about, and it's something that I'm putting some time and energy in towards thinking about and trying to understand, what am I holding back, what's stopping me from committing more. So yeah, that's something that's unfolding.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, because it also gives me a lot of thought about, being how beautiful being vulnerable can be. And it would surprise you what kind of effect it can do to you, like how it would change you. Yes. But I respect that you're doing more work on yourself even after all these years of doing that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's like vulnerability is the connection that happens between two people when two people can be totally open, honest, and vulnerable. Yeah. And I'm always down for like deep, honest, vulnerable conversations, just because of the connections that it creates with others.
Well, thank you so much, Ed, for coming today and sharing all the beautiful stories.
Thank you so much for having me, Monica. Really enjoyed it.